So today we're going to talk about the psychology of wealth, and we're really going to kind of dive into the impact of how the mindset affects the way that we invest.
A lot.
And if we stay invested, if we make good choices, if we make bad choices. Kind of take you back during COVID. I ended up going through that Wharton psychology class for several weeks. We had nothing else to do. We were working, of course, but we had a lot of spare time. We were all homebound.
Can you believe that was 5 years ago almost?
No.
It feels like yesterday.
It kind of feels like we're still in it just a little bit. I think we all have, I don't want to make light of PTSD, but it kind of feels like we all, when we talk about COVID now, we all kind of clam up a little bit. And I know you don't even like to talk about it anymore.
No.
It's one of your things you don't want to talk about. But let's start with the power of belief in financial success. What have you found? I mean, you've worked with a lot of individual clients. You've also worked pretty in depth with the 401k space. And a lot of times when you're sitting down with a 401k participant, you're the only advisor they're ever going to talk to.
Right. Well, it has a lot to do with your belief systems. It has a lot to do with how you've been educated or not educated about finance. It also, it's kind of like your health or anything else. If you believe something is going to or not going to happen, then it probably will, because that's really, for lack of a better word, that's really what you're manifesting. And so it could be, some of your beliefs could be from your family's experiences. Think about
100%.
Think about the different generations right now. So let's talk about millennials, Gen X, and how the 2008 financial crisis affected them later in life because of their financial beliefs.
Really whipped them back into the role of saving.
Right.
I mean, we're seeing that's like their number one goal now is to save, which is, it was the last group was prior to the baby boomers.
Yeah.
That really emphasize saving.
So millennials were more concerned about paying off debt, and Gen Z is all about saving. That is their number one priority.
That's wild. We talk about those deep conversations you have with how did your family manage money? And did you come from a family that, was always tight, was always strapped? Did you come from a wealthy family where you got everything handed to you, and you didn't really have any stress? Were you somewhere in between? Did your family operate on debt, or did they operate on always having everything paid off? And how does that bleed through?
It definitely bleeds through. And, that bleeds through into like the risk you're willing to take in investing or in life decisions that are financial driven, such as a new job and having to move across the country. For some, that would never be an option. For some others, that'd be like, heck yeah, let's go. Let's go on the adventure. So, it really does come back to a lot of those core beliefs that, you have growing up or what you've learned or experienced. So those shape your financial goals for the future.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think any of us that have been in the industry for a long time, when we're first having a discovery meeting and we're sitting down with a client, they expect us to ask about, talk about betas and PEGIs and PEGI ratios and why do we have this investment and, the performance and they're sometimes surprised where our first questions are about, what's important to you financially? What's your favorite vacation? What's your favorite weekend? We're asking those questions to find out what makes them tick and what their experiences have been so that we can better manage their funds. We might ask a question like, what is a word or two words that first come to mind that you associate with money? And what do we often hear? What are some of those words?
Security.
Sometimes you hear power. Sometimes you hear fun, freedom.
Right.
And really what you're talking about there, that's emotion, right? So that's 100% a psychological response to what the way you feel about money. How do you overcome those biases?
It's difficult because they're natural biases, like loss aversion, for example. Nobody likes to lose anything. Once you have something, it's really hard to let it go. So I think a lot of education and going through different market cycles and seeing how they work, and really having an advisor and a confidant to help you on that path along the way to overcome those. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be overconfidence.
Yeah, of course.
Somebody that wants to take too much risk because they're just they've seen really great markets.
Well, and loss aversion goes two ways. This is the interesting thing that I think I remember it so well because it was one of them that caught me on one of my credentials when I was learning early on in the business, and it was the question had to do with, take for example NVIDIA. NVIDIA's up a lot, and for a lot of clients, what was a 2 or 3% position is now a 20% position, and you're telling them, I think we need to sell half of this and get it back into order. They say, well, I don't want to sell. Well, we've made a lot of money. Why don't we capture some gains? Well, what if it goes up more? That's actually loss aversion.
Right.
They don't want to lose the rest of what it could make.
Yeah, lose that opportunity.
And again, I think part of a good place for clients to start is, again, if you have a great advisor that asks those questions, is the advisor shouldn't keep it a secret. The advisor should say, so let me tell you what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is you've got some issues around this, around security. You have some issues around volatility. You're not going to be able to stomach the ups and downs as well, maybe. So let's try and get something more stable, or let's have some guaranteed income in there. So even when the market's down, you're still going to hit your goals and you're going to be okay. So sometimes we use those tools to offset that behavioral bias.
Right. And that even comes with anchoring where, say this January 1st of last year, your portfolio was worth $1 million, and this year it's worth 1.5. So you have a new anchor. And so you're working off of that new number, even though, there could be some volatility where it goes below that 1.5, even though you've made a $500,000 gain.
Yeah, it could fall 25% overall, and you've still averaged better than a double-digit return over time.
Right. You're changing your benchmark.
Sure.
So, those are kind of conversations that we have to have with
There's a couple clients that come to mind when we talk about it. I'm not gonna lie. There's a couple folks that continue to grab that benchmark and want to say, well, let's do it again from here. And
right.
when we're talking about performance over time, we're really talking about overall performance, including the ups and downs.
Right.
To where we get to an average.
Right. And that goes back to what we always say is, we can always have that goal towards the horizon, but we're never going to reach it. So we've always got to go back and measure progress. We also have to go back and measure behavior, because it could be, well, you're up 500,000, but you also took 200 in distributions. And so you have to consider all of those variables when we're working through our planning.
Sure.
So
it comes back to, and I'm not telling you this, I'm saying it for our listeners. I mean, we're really, one of the best ways to get around measuring performance is when you set clear, purpose-driven goals. And you can ask yourself, am I still on track to those goals? If my portfolio falls 10%, am I still on track for those goals? If my portfolio falls 30%, am I still on track for those goals? If the answer is yes, then you really don't have anything to worry about, right?
right.
I mean, and that's why we always, at KDI, we always focus so much on planning-based, goal-based investing versus, 100% performance. We'll talk about performance because our clients deserve to know if we're doing well and frankly, compared to their risk.
Right.
Not to the risk of their neighbor or the risk of their brother or the risk of someone else, but to their risk.
Well, and it kind of goes back to the differences between finance and accounting. We're in the finance industry. We're about strategy and forecasting and looking to the future so you make sure that you reach your goals.
Right.
We still are accountable to the accounting, but that's already happened.
Right.
That's in the past. So, of course, we're going to have a small focus on the accounting aspect of it, but we're not accountants, we're finance. And so that's where our strategy and our forward looking is so vital for our clients.
It goes back to that story we were talking about. I think it was yesterday, the day before, and I used that analogy. We're in the Scottsdale office today. If I decide to go to downtown Phoenix, I can take 100 different ways to get to downtown Phoenix. I can hop on the interstate. Once I'm on the interstate, I can choose to be in the right lane, or I can choose to be in the carpool lane. If I'm in the carpool lane, I better be going 90 miles an hour, or I'm going to get run over in Phoenix because everybody else is going 90 miles an hour. I could choose to take surface streets and enjoy my drive, and deal with the lights, and maybe I take a pickup because I like a big, heavy vehicle around me. Maybe I take a sports car because I like to drive fast.
Then you have to go through the Lincoln corridor because it's so pretty and windy.
It really comes down to personal preference. And that's another thing that I think can be a big pitfall. If you're not with the right advisor, you might have somebody that's just following, there are certain things that we believe in our industry that are our biases, that stocks always do better over time, which is true over time. So far, we've never had a stock market that hasn't recovered yet. We've never had a stock market that didn't do better over time than, other asset classes like, fixed income, bonds, cash.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't stomach the ride, then you shouldn't be in those types of investments.
Right. And you have to realize if you can't stomach it, then you're not going to see massive gains. Like your neighbor. That kind of goes into like the social aspect of investing.
I don't want to lose anything, but I want to make just as much as my neighbor who's 100% in aggressive stocks.
Right. And, it's not just that. It's not what Jim's doing next door or your best friend's doing. It's also, it really is in the social circles that you have, well, what are you doing? And, well, why am I not doing that? And then there's like this, what word am I trying to get to?
Comparison bias?
Comparison bias or, I think it's more of a comparison. And you know what comparison is? It's the thief of joy.
A thief of joy.
And
so everything you always have happiness
right.
until you compare yourself to somebody else or somebody else's outcome.
Right. And that person may be able to stomach the ups and downs that you're not able to. Maybe they're in a completely different financial.
You might be married to them. By the way. Sometimes you got a spouse that manages their money very different from their cohort.
Right. And sometimes you might be in a completely different financial situation, and sometimes they just might be full of it. Yeah. That's what I find a lot of times if, they're talking too much about it and about their fabulous
25% a year.
Yeah, their fabulous returns. I'm like, I've been in this business a while.
I'm thinking maybe not.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so it's really, stick to your plan with your advisor and kind of disseminate and get rid of all that noise that doesn't really, frankly, it doesn't pertain to you and it's none of your business.
Somebody caught me in the hall the other day, a client just down the hall from our building here. And they said, I'm starting to really get concerned about my portfolio. I'm worried, I just have a bad feeling. Things aren't going, maybe they're not happy with the election results. Maybe they're not happy with some of the volatility we're seeing or the inflation or a lot of those things get under your skin and the media starts to hype a bunch of stuff. And after a while, it's hard to avoid the way you feel. And he, his comment was basically, how do I prepare? I said, well, you're doing the right thing. You're asking the question before the bad times come. The time to speak up to your advisor and the time to let them know that you're concerned is before the market begins to correct or before you have an experience that you don't want to go through. And again, a lot of times we're using that strategy where we have several years of safe money, several years of moderate, and several years of aggressive in a portfolio. So sometimes it's enough to go in and get reassured, hey, if you decide to retire tomorrow, we've got the first 5 years figured out. That takes out most bad markets.
Right.
And just get reassured. Or maybe it's time that maybe your risk has changed and it's time to adjust your portfolio. But the time to do it is not when things are already starting to get ugly. The time to do it is when you're having those feelings long before.
Right. Well, and our time to do it is from the very beginning. Because when we're building out your plan, we're already accounting for all those scenarios. So it's like, yeah, we're going to go through these cyclical markets and we're going to experience some short-term pain. And we like short-term might be a year or two in a market cycle. But,
Sure.
But, at the same time, we would have already planned for all of that and, accounted for any dips in the market and know that you're going to be okay. If not, we're going to come back and say, hey, you're spending too much or you're not saving enough.
You're not taking enough risk
right.
to meet the goals that you're
exactly
putting out there for yourself.
So that's, this biggest, most important thing is the plan.
So I think to kind of tie this all back together, when I think about it, I think number one, you need to have great communication with your advisor. And you need to have somebody that you feel confident in sharing how you really feel.
Right.
And don't keep any secrets. If you don't feel like you can watch your portfolio fall 20%, you better tell your advisor because it's not fair to hold them to something that you haven't shared.
Right. True.
So that would be number one. What else would you think would set you up for success from a psychological standpoint?
Again, it's going back to your advisor because you're going to wake up or you're going to see a news story and you're going to panic. And I don't panic. You're not going to fall apart, but it's like you're going to have maybe a little heart-stopping moment. Did I do the right thing? And just make the call. Say, hey, I saw this. Does this make sense? Does this pertain to me? Am I thinking about this properly? And really kind of just, your advisor is your confidant, your financial confidant.
Sure.
It's like, or your counselor, really. And just kind of verify that, your thinking is on the right track.
Right. Good. Well, so if you haven't done it yet, if you got any questions, pick up the phone and call your advisor. Make sure you're communicating with your advisor and make sure that they know what's going on. If your advisor is us, we're always here. Reach out and we'll go through things with you. Make sure you're in the right, the right investments, or like we like to say, in the right seat. But again, I think open communication, honest communication about how you feel. Let them or let us demonstrate through charts and what markets have done in the past that you're going to be okay. And one of our core values is the sleep at night factor, and that doesn't mean that we can guarantee you sleep well, but it means that if you're not sleeping well, you should be talking to us.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.